I let go and I find my center, not by grabbing onto it, but by realizing what can change and what remains always the same within all of that change. Hi, I'm Grant Kleiman from Darsana Martial Arts. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to support us and get exclusive content, check out links in the description. All right, let's get to the lesson. Back to the Tao Te Ching. This is chapter 7. And I think with this chapter, we start getting a little bit more into what it's teaching us to do in terms of the way we conduct ourselves and deal with issues. Chapter 7 in Stephen Mitchell's version says, "The Tao is infinite, eternal. Why is it eternal? It was never born. Thus, it can never die. Why is it infinite? It has no desires for itself. Thus, it is present for all beings. The Master stays behind. That is why she is ahead. She is detached from all things. That is why she is one with them. Because she has let go of herself, she is perfectly fulfilled." The gist of this chapter is something we've been talking about actually quite a lot. It's this notion that while counterintuitive, only by letting go of ourselves, our striving towards a particular goal or a particular outcome of a particular situation or circumstance that we either wish to maintain or to attain, only by letting go of that do we find balance and center. And might we succeed in achieving either that or perhaps a even more appropriate goal, appropriate in the sense of a goal that is in alignment with what we really need. So the Tao is infinite, eternal. Why is it infinite? It was never born, thus it can never die. This is establishing a state in which there's no fixed point. When something is infinite, it has no beginning and no end, and therefore cannot be understood in terms of sort of defining measurements. It has no fixed point in the sense that it isn't anything in particular, therefore it can be anything that's necessary. So this is applying to the Wuji principle. The state of Wuji we try to cultivate in our practice. Why is it infinite? It has no desires for itself, thus it is present for all beings. This idea of being present for all beings, this is what I mean. For us, the moment we fix ourselves on something or try to maintain a very specific position, we make ourselves sort of rigid. And we can only sort of be that. We can only do that. We cannot adapt to something that is other than maybe what we expected or what we wanted or what we were trying to attain. That puts us in a position of struggle, of opposition to what may actually be going on, because we haven't really stopped and listened and paid attention. Rather, we are in a state where we have sort of fixed our perspective in a certain way. You'll see how this applies to our practice, hopefully in a moment. So this idea, because it is infinite, it has no fixed point and no fixed shape. It is not like, for example, a tool that has a limited number of applications. And we can do this to ourselves. We kind of take on identities, positions, roles, perspectives of ourselves, of what we're capable of and what we're not capable of, or procedures that are correct as opposed to things that are incorrect. And we box in possibility. And by boxing in possibility, we necessarily lose potential. Now, this is a tough thing because we need to take on certain roles. We need to aim for certain goals. These are things that are part of life, and if we don't do that, then we only remain in a state of unmanifest potential. And that's actually no good either. Otherwise, all we would do is just Wu Ji, and there'd be no Tai Chi. We don't want to remain in this unmanifest, unrealized state. But at the same time, when we get into this mode of insisting that that state be a certain state or a certain way, that manifestation of whatever it is that we want, and we get over-specific about it, and then we grasp at it and we try to hold on to it, and we are unwilling to let go of something that we think is good, or even something that we don't think is good, but it's familiar and safe, this is where we get into trouble. The master stays behind, that is why she is ahead. She is detached from all things, that is why she is one with them. Because she has let go of herself, she is perfectly fulfilled. It sounds paradoxical. You stay behind, therefore you end up ahead. You detach from all things, therefore you are one with them. First of all, it doesn't sound like it makes immediate sense. But then somebody might take that and go, oh, okay, I get it. Whatever you want, you just do the opposite, and then you get what you want. And that's not it either. That's not it either. The best way for me to understand this is through the practice. This idea of letting go to become whole. This idea, I think, makes sense when you understand it from the perspective that when we grasp onto ourselves, right, when we try to hold our position, a fixed position physically, with tension, with strength or struggle, it's like we contain all of our density and mass within our body in these like different separate units, and everything becomes rigid and unadaptable. And we're doing that to try to preserve ourselves, to try to preserve some state that we think is desirable. But in doing that, we make ourselves vulnerable to being knocked down by all kinds of forces. A tree that is rigid is uprooted by a powerful wind. A tree that is willing to bend ends up surviving the storm. So in this sense, we let go of ourselves, we go our last and find ourselves ahead. When we strive, this is where we kind of oftentimes find ourselves in trouble. Actually, Howard, can I borrow you for a moment? Get into a stance? Yeah. So if Howard is pushing on me and I want to preserve my position, I want to stay me and where I am, my instinct will be one of two things usually. I'm either going to try to brace and struggle, in which case I bind myself up and I become unadaptable to change. Because I'm trying to maintain and preserve a state which was good, under the new circumstances is no longer good. And so in trying to save myself in this sense, in trying to get ahead, I fall behind. In other words, in trying to win that moment externally by trying to make the external circumstances what I want them to be, which is, he doesn't get to move me. And this is an easy error to make. It's a natural, intuitive thing that we do. The other thing that I might do is try to escape and run away. And if I do, eventually, usually, he'll catch up to me. And usually it'll be worse than if I didn't try to run away. So it's not that, oh, I'm going to do the opposite of trying to maintain myself and then I'll get to be maintained. That's not right either. What I want to do is I want to release rigidity. And now what happens is my body is naturally adjusting to the forces in accordance to that inner balance. So the core of me gets to remain precisely where it is. And maybe it's hard to see, but Howard's pushing quite hard. And then by staying behind, I get ahead, right? I'm ahead in the sense that I didn't try to win. I just attended internally to my own balance. I let myself go. Therefore, I remained whole. I'm detached, right? In this case, I'm not attached to a result, and I'm not trying to force Howard to do something. I detach from that worry, but then when I let go and detach, our forces, our energies get connected, right? So it's like I let go of me, and his force gets absorbed into my body, and now actually he's just connected. I just move, and he's connected to that at the core. So this is where, for me, this is where I really understand the line when it comes to dealing with force. I don't go through door number one. He pushes. I don't try to insist on where I am or to change where he is, because that ends up binding and containing all the different parts. It actually separates my body into all these different parts that are braced against each other. I don't try to run away, because then I've just created more space for his pursuit. You can't ultimately escape from whatever circumstances there are. Eventually things catch up with you one way or the other, and usually they're worse than they were when they first were dealing with them. I let go, and this unifies me with him. I let go, and this makes me maintain a wholeness. I let go and I find my center, not by grabbing onto it, but by realizing what can change and what remains always the same within all of that change. But when I grab onto it, I sort of lose that core, that center. Thank you. It seems paradoxical, but when you relate to it in terms of that skill, it becomes a very obvious, tangible, physical reality. It makes sense. Oh, let myself go, as in, don't try to grasp myself in a solid, rigid shape and remain that way forever. I want to just, for a moment, talk about addressing things internally versus addressing them externally. We sort of already touched on that, but just in principle. When we address things externally, that's going to lead us to Monkey Unro's door number 1 and door number 2 concept, excessively yang, excessively yin. Because whatever's going on that we feel is an issue, it's a problem, we're either going to feel that we need to solve it by insisting that things stay the same. In other words, we try not to let the external circumstance change our situation. Or we try to make the external circumstance something different than it is, forcing it to be what we want it to be. Now, sometimes we succeed, and that seems like a good thing in the immediate, because we got what we believed we wanted. The problem with that is, the more that we do that, the more it reinforces this idea that by dint of willpower, or some other form of power, power being the ability to affect external circumstances, let's say, in some way, our sense of capacity that we can always do that and always get what we want is reinforced. And so we do it over again and over again, and it's like the market bubble, right? Everything seems to be going really well. But as we know, pride goeth before the fall. We get to a higher and higher point, and that means the crash from there is going to be much worse. And there is always an inevitable crash, because nothing can continue to just be better and better and better and better and better in that sense. We can't constantly improve our external circumstances because we can't control external circumstances. And so the sort of irreducible element of the unknown and surprising and chaotic will come in at some point. And also our energies are not infinite. On the other side, of course, if we try and fail, then we have to deal with the wound to our ego that we don't know actually how to handle things, and we're not actually capable because we tried to change things and we couldn't, and so that feels like a failure. So succeed or fail, you end up in this imbalanced place that will ultimately be unsatisfying. Because even when you succeed, and we know this, when something's going on and we just force it to be a certain way, it doesn't feel good, at least not if we're mentally healthy. It can become a bigger issue, as I said, later on. On the other side, if you escape, right, so you're trying to affect your external circumstances by simply locating yourself in some other external circumstance. So now my external circumstances are different. I haven't actually addressed my problem. I've only escaped for the moment. But it's like running away from a tumbling snowball. It's still there, and you always have this feeling of looking over your shoulder. Did you succeed in getting away? Yeah, for now. But you are left with this feeling of the unresolved, and it grows as it continues to follow you and becomes something that is more and more dangerous and potent, like a snowball tumbling down the hill after you getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So by the time it finally catches up with you, it's worse, right? This is what we could see in the little demonstration I did with Howard. That's if we succeed. If we fail in escaping, then it's the same problem that is if we failed in trying to change external circumstances more aggressively. Again, we feel whatever our methods and strategies for dealing with life are no good, and then this can lead to depression. In either case, we either end up with a falsely inflated sense of capacity that will catch up with us in the long run and be worse, or we end up with a feeling of depression and incapacity to do the things we want to do. So whenever we address things in this sort of external manner of trying to change what's going on the outside to make us feel better on the inside, it ends up at best being momentarily satisfying, and at worst, leading to catastrophe. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but ultimately, it's never really a satisfying answer. What does work is addressing things internally. When we address what's going on within, when we find our way towards internal balance, which in part is a recognition of what we can't control, or what will not ever always be within our capacity to influence, let's say. Because let's say if I'm doing push hands with Howard, maybe I could overpower him. Maybe I could escape him and do a maneuver. But I won't ever always be able to succeed like that. And if Howard was somebody else who was stronger, or if Howard was somebody else who was quicker and more dynamic, I wouldn't be able to deal with it in that way. And then I'd be like, darn it, I thought I was good and now I don't think I'm good anymore. If I address instead my internal Wu-Ji, well, first of all, that's always the same thing. It's always the same approach. So there is a kind of ability to cultivate that and improve that. Second of all, whatever it is I'm dealing with, I'm always really trying to address my internal state of being. I just think I can address it by dealing with external circumstances. But if I start by addressing my internal state of being and finding balance first inside, what happens is the way that whatever's happening on the outside is interacting with me changes because I have changed. The quality of what I am has altered. And when something touches me or comes into contact with me, whether it's actually physical, like Howard, or whether it's something less tangible, like a life circumstance, when something comes in contact with me, it in turn is changed by coming into contact with my constant adjustment back towards balance, my return to Wu-Ji. And this is how our internal work radiates into the world. This is how, if we want to make the world a better place, that's how you do it. You don't do it by externally trying to change the world. You change inside toward internal harmony and balance. And whatever comes into contact with you is changed by that contact. When Howard was working with me and I stiffened up, he got to continue to do what he was already doing. He got to continue to be in the same state. Whether he won or not is irrelevant. What's relevant is he was still just using his strength and power to move me. And when I tried to run away, he was still doing the same thing. He was essentially unaffected. When I changed my internal state, that's when he started to feel unbalanced and struggle. Would you say that's true? Yeah? That's when it felt like a different experience on his end. And then when I moved and changed after applying that, not trying to do anything to him, but trying to change me, that's what created this issue. Let me borrow you one more time, Howard, and I just want to show this in a slightly different way. Now you're going to do this. So let's say I've got you here. Right? I've got this kind of uncomfortable position for the shoulder. He's compromised. His root is lifted up, all of this. And common first reaction is going to be to either try to sort of escape this in some way, maneuver out of this position, door number 2, or door number 1, fight against it and struggle to not let me do what I'm doing. But what if he doesn't do any of that? What if instead he starts going through his procedure to find Wu-Ji inside? So I say, you feel this, and I say, Bai Hui up. Don't try to solve anything here. Right? Get the mind out of this point and put it back inside. Bai Hui up, then open and sink through Jian Jing. I already feel the change. Don't get happy, right? So you start doing good, and then you go, ooh, I can feel it's changing. Now I can go external and win. And that's, right? Then you're back. Oh, it's almost good. Door number 1. Right? Don't do that. Don't, see it through. This is the hard part. The ego goes, ooh, and then wants to do door number 1. When the ego thinks it's going to win, it wants door number 1. When the ego thinks it's going to lose, it wants door number 2. We don't offer it either. Okay? Bai Hui, Jing. Don't give yourself the opportunity, even if you feel things improving for you. Ku Chi in the elbow, right? Open it, don't push it. Yeah, extend through it. Fill Lao Gong. Don't worry about it touching anything. Yeah. Zhong Fu underneath the collarbones. There you go. Qi Men in the ribs. There you go. Don't start thinking you know what it's going to be. Just keep going with it. Zhong Men in the ribs. That's it. The shoulder blades sink. Filming Men, extend the tailbone. Don't assume. Open the shoulder. Keep sinking. Yes, that's it. See how that's different than what you were doing before, where you wanted to kind of drive and turn? Right. So incrementally, as he addressed his own internal balance, he felt things improving, and I felt it was getting worse for me. I felt that I was struggling. This is what it means when, like, the master stays behind but finds herself ahead. You could also say, remember in a previous chapter it said, hold to the center. Right? Stay behind as in stay within. Don't go struggling and striving to gain something out here. Focus on the balance within. This is how we address everything. And it is harder than it seems because it is counterintuitive. It is not immediately satisfying to the ego, and it takes cultivation. The first times you try to do it, you will likely still feel like you have found some degree of failure. If you're still orienting to the notion that success is altering external circumstances in the way you wanted them to be altered. You have to completely flip the paradigm and say that success is that I found more balance in that circumstance inside than I did the last time I was in similar circumstances. And then you keep doing that because ultimately, if whatever's happening to you doesn't unbalance you, isn't that really what you are after when trying to change external circumstances? I would say yes. The only reason we want control of what's going on outside is so that it doesn't make us feel bad inside. Because ultimately our experience is inside. We just attribute what our internal experience is at the moment to external things and events. Now, it's not to say that there isn't any sort of degree of real value in certain things going on and not going on, right? There are external things that we want. But if we attend internally to our internal balance, and that is the main thing, then the way we relate to what's going on outside will be as good as it possibly could be. And it will likely be better oriented to what it is we want, because what we want will begin to come out of that state of internal balance and harmony, rather than what we want being some kind of arbitrary notion of what's going to be good for us on the outside. It becomes a kind of internal knowing, a sense or sensibility, rather than sort of an externally imposed or applied idea about what is good and what is not, that likely doesn't even entirely come from you, but comes from your culture, both sort of your more immediate culture, like let's say the people that are around you, the things you've learned growing up, and the things you've internalized, and of course your larger culture, the culture that you're a part of in the larger world around you. All of that feeds in and becomes a structure. And while that is not the enemy, it is something that should always be understood in relation to a more fundamental internal understanding of your own balance and something that is a satisfaction or a fulfillment or a contentment that comes from within. And then that will radiate out, and then the world around you will be more what you'd like it to be, but not necessarily what you thought it should be before you began that work. Okay? Thank you, guys.